Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Makbool with you at BTV World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at two important stories. One with reference to what is going on at home, and the second looking at what is going on around us in our neighborhood, specifically in Afghanistan. In our first story, we're going to be taking a look at what unfortunately becomes the focus of the political domain whenever we see this particular matter coming to light, which is, of course, with regards to the Chief of Army Staff's appointment. And unfortunately, even though we have heard the statements coming in from the Chief of Army Staff and the Army's leadership talking about how they are not involved in any political domain, they do not even wish to be involved in the political arena in Pakistan, and that they will be not participating in anything which is related to political matters. But unfortunately, it seems that it is the political leadership that perhaps keeps on dragging the leadership and the institutions within the conversation. The Chief of Army Staff has time and again reiterated the matter of his extension and has denied his intent to take that, and said that he will be stepping down as the Chief of Army Staff on the 29th of November next month. And this is something that he has spoken at various occasions, and most recently also at an event in Washington. However, despite that, there are a lot of statements coming in from the political leadership, particularly with regards to the PTI and the former Prime Minister Imran Khan, who keeps talking about the appointment of the Chief of Army Staff, making it controversial and making statements which are contradictory in nature, such as the fact that the Army Chief should have an extension till the elections, and then the fact that the Army's leadership or the institution should not in fact be neutral and should be involved in the political domain, and it is not befitting for them in fact to be neutral, and that's befitting of something else. This is of course something that has been talked about quite often by the PTI chairman. So when we take a look at this entire context, of course, it puts to light the particular narrative that the PTI is talking about and mentioning. But then in the larger scheme of things, also in terms of how we have seen the political evolution and development in Pakistan, that unfortunately, whenever there is conversation with regards to this appointment, it becomes the focus and the center of attention of the political domain. So we're going to be taking a look at that in general as well, and what needs to be done about it. Furthermore, we'll also be taking into context what President Arif Alvi has said recently in an interview, that there should be broad consultation and consensus with regards to the Army Chief, and that in fact the extension, the matter of the extension of the current Army Chief when the PTI leadership was in power was also undertaken with the then opposition. So this is something which is good and welcome and should be done also. But he also reiterated the fact that he will be appointing the next Army Chief in line with the procedure laid out in the Constitution. There is also what happened today in terms of the interaction that the PTI chairman has had with journalists in Lahore, in which he mentioned that when he was in power, he only had a responsibility and the actual power lied in the hands of someone else. Without naming, he has mentioned this particular statement and implied that the actual power lied at the hands of someone who everybody knows and needs not be mentioned. So we're going to be taking a closer look at what that means and how that's going to impact the way that we're going to be taking a look at PTI's rule, and then of course in the coming days what sort of development is going to happen, also keeping in mind the context that the PTI chairman keeps on referring to as the Hakiki Azadi March, whose date or time nobody knows as of yet. We're also going to be taking a look in our second segment of the show today at what is going on internationally, particularly with regards to the crises that the people unfortunately in Afghanistan have been facing for many decades, but especially since the withdrawal of the US troops last year and the control of the Taliban regime again in Afghanistan. When this first happened, of course, there were a lot of commitments coming in, a lot of assurances coming in from the Taliban leadership that their reign this time around will not be similar to that of the past, and they will have a softer version. And there was a lot of hope with regards to these commitments. But unfortunately, many of those have not been fulfilled, especially really important ones such as the inclusivity in the government, and then also with regards to the treatment of women and access to education for girls and women across the country. We know that perhaps women are being allowed to attend universities, but secondary education has been banned for girls in Afghanistan beyond the 6th grade, and we have seen that unfortunately, even more than a year has passed, that this ban has not been lifted. This is something and has been talked about at the United Nations as well by the Secretary General as well, saying that this is of course completely unnecessary and tragic, that this is something that has seen an anniversary. And then when we talk about this particular right of females, it is having a negative impact not just on them but on the future of Afghanistan as well, and perhaps the Taliban regime needs to understand it. What has happened now is that the US has imposed further sanctions with regards to the kind of treatment that has been meted out, and this particular ban on education. This was made by Secretary of State Anthony Blinken on United Nations International Day of the Girl Child, in which there have been a new policy announced with regards to a visa. This is a visa restriction policy for the current or the former members of the Taliban who are directly or indirectly involved in these restrictive policies. There is also, unfortunately, the incidents and the way that we have seen the terrorist incidents spike throughout the country, with the target unfortunately being women. We've seen that much recently there has been a suicide killing in Kabul in which women were specifically targeted in an education institute in which they were giving practice tests for university entrance exam, and the UN has put the death toll at 53, including 46 girls and young women, and said that the suicide bomber had this particular target in mind with regards to the women. So we're going to be taking a look at what this means and how moving forward we're going to be seeing any change with regards to this or not, and what the international community must do about it if we don't see one. For this and more, as always, in the studios, we've been joined by senior analyst Raja Faisal, and our other senior analyst has joined us online from Gavadir. Farooq Batafi is with us, and then we've also been joined by Ms. Nayab Jan, who's a senior analyst, and hopefully we'll be joined by Mr. Javed Jadoon very soon as well. Thank you very much, everyone, for being a part of the show. Let me start with you, Nayab. When we take a look at the political developments of the country, it is unfortunate that we have seen a lot of political games happen in the recent times, and they've been going on for quite some time. But what is most unfortunate is the way that this also involves institutions, and perhaps an important institution that wants to step away from this domain and has clearly talked about their intention not to be a part of the political arena. However, we have seen that perhaps it is the other way around, where we have the political leadership that keeps on dragging them into this again and again. With regards to this particular appointment of the Chief of Army Staff and the way that this has to be taken forward, how do you see the recent controversies that have been talked about by the PTI chairman in the larger context of the political leadership?
Thank you very much. I think the most important thing is that we need not say that all political leaders have made this appointment controversial, or they've
Sure.
brought it up repeatedly in their speeches. I am from Pakistan People's Party, and we've been very clear from the get-go that all institutions must act within their roles that have been defined in the Constitution, and that is exactly what we were seeing right now. As you rightly pointed out, that several members of the armed forces of the establishment have repeatedly said that they do not want this process to become controversial, that they do not want to be dragged into this, political drama that Mr. Imran Khan is carrying out right now. But unfortunately, given that Imran Khan's, his entire politics has revolved around making institutions controversial and politicizing institutions. That is exactly what he is doing right now. When you have several members of an institution on record who neither desire an extension nor wish to be politicized and actually want to take a step back and want to perform their constitutionally mandated role, and you have the PDM, which has repeatedly said that it is the prerogative of the Prime Minister to appoint the Chief of Army Staff. I think that it is absolutely very, very unfortunate that Mr. Imran Khan is repeatedly making this process politicized and controversial to appeal to his voter base, to take his own personal political agendas forward. So it's highly, highly unfortunate. And I think that the blame lies solely on Mr. Imran Khan for making this process so controversial, and for dragging people who don't want to be dragged into this process, for saying very, very unbecoming things, in his jalsas and rallies about institutions, targeting them in ways that they've never been targeted before. So I think that the PTM is very clear. We are very clear that everything must happen according to the constitution. And it is definitely Mr. Imran Khan who wants to be selected again, who doesn't want, the establishment to be neutral. And that is what his entire agenda is right now.
Right. Farooq, I want to understand how exactly is this appointment made controversial, because it seems pretty clear that when we take a look at the entire procedure and the way that this appointment is made, it is of course based on merit. There is a criteria, there are a number of people out of which a person is nominated, and then this goes to the president, and there's of course an entire procedure that happens with the consensus and with the merit that has been put in place by the institutions as well. Where exactly does this become controversial, which the PTI chairman keeps on referring to? Because at the end of the day, it is happening on merit, and it doesn't make sense the kind of allegations that are being spoken about with regards to the appointment contributing to the safeguarding of any corruption of any political party or the leadership. How is that even related, and how can these two be separated? Because when we keep on hearing this coming in from political leaders who enjoy such popularity as a PTI chairman Imran Khan does, it becomes perhaps really confusing for the public in general that this entire procedure is in fact not that complicated or controversial at all.
Right, Sana, if you were listening to what Imran Khan Sahab was saying today, it was clear that his talk was clearly full of contradictions. But regardless of that, I wanted to correct record regarding one aspect that our worthy guest actually was saying. Let me be very honest. I think every political party, when it was at the receiving end of the political dispensation, did exactly the same thing. When People's Party and PMLN were out of power at that time also, they were criticizing the current leadership of army. But that is one thing to do, because they did not actually try to divide armies. They did not ask the lower cadres to actually stand up against the armed forces. Right now, today, when Imran Khan Sahab was actually granted, People's Party, by the way, was softer on these issues than PMLN was, but there you have it. This is Pakistan's political culture. What Imran Khan Sahab has done this time is taking the old tradition of attacking an institution that is like a giving tree to the next level, where he is simultaneously trying to divide the forces as well, trying to lobby for one candidate or the other. And then he also says that he does not want any favorite candidate. And in the end, he also then, launches waived the tax on the current leadership of army. Today, what he was saying was that I'm not corrupt, so I don't need any favorite army chief. Somebody has to tell me someday, what does an army chief have to do with any kind of corruption cases?
Exactly.
Constitution of Pakistan does not include army in such business. It is basically the responsibility of various institutions which are there to monitor corruption. An army chief, by the way, is not supposed to have anything to do with it, because he commands the combatants, the forces that are going to fight for the security of the country, and that has been happening for quite some time. Imran Khan Sahab's repeated statement today, that I don't need any favorite army chief, is actually in total contradiction of what he has been trying to do of late. Today, he also, by the way, did something very unique. He is supposed to be this, macho leader, someone who doesn't take dictates from anybody. And today he conceded, or he claimed, that when he was power, he was sort of kind of not in power at all. Somebody else was actually calling shots. The question is, if you could wait for 22 years not to compromise on your principles, who asked you to start compromising this
I
time?
agree.
If there was no power in your hands, why on the face of this world did you have to go and accept a dispensation where you did not have power? So there are contradictions. But today, what we saw that is that he actually launched simultaneously veiled attacks on the current leadership of army, and then he also said that he does not want his favorite army chief. But astoundingly, a few days ago, few weeks ago, when he actually spoke about change of command. And by the way, President of Pakistan, who actually came from his party, keeps on saying that there should be broader consultation regarding appointment of army chief. I ask why. The Constitution of Pakistan has this procedure for the appointment of chief election commissioner, that the opposition leader has to be consulted, and even for chairman NAB, that the opposition leader will be consulted. But tell me, why should the appointment of an army chief be subjected to the same thing? There is a laid down procedure that the list
Right.
goes
Part of
from
the reference
GHQ
that
or
the president
defense
was
ministry
giving was
to
the
the
fact
prime
that when
minister.
there was the extension, this consultation did happen with the then opposition. That's the reference he was making. Is that something that supports his argument, or is contradictory
Right,
to it?
but why? I mean, you're adding to the problem then. Why was that consultation made? A, my problem with any kind of extension is that it goes against the principle of merit, right? When you are actually giving an extension, you're depriving many very, very capable people. I know that the current leadership is very capable. But tell me, are you telling me that at that time there was no one else who could have replaced him, right? So this becomes a problematic thing, and the person who actually went for it needs to come forward and tell us that if he is launching these attacks today, why did he actually go for this extension, and why he made the mockery of the system? Because at that time the matter went to the Honorable Court. From Honorable Court it came back to the Honorable Parliament, and then there had to be amendment to the law. Why was that done? If you did not have confidence in somebody, why did you have to offer extension to them, right? So this becomes a problematic thing. My question is that in Constitution it is not written that the appointment of an army chief has to be subjected to consultation with opposition. So there is no need. And if you last time Imran Khan Sahab spoke, he said that I'm ready if the government gives the incumbent 4 or 5 months, so that when I come to power, I can decide who becomes the army chief. The pundits or punters are actually deducing that he wants at least one person out of the current list not to be considered for army chief. That's why he wants to extend the period. So all these attempts are actually attempts to make a force that is continuously sacrificing for the country controversial, which is not fair.
Absolutely. And Faisal, when we take a look at all of this, it becomes quite obvious what really is happening, because the way that the statements are being made, it hides the fact that what has happened before or what sort of motivations existed in the past, such as statements that have been coming out today from the PTI chairman saying that he does not want any favorite person, he does not want to appoint somebody himself, and he is not interested in that appointment. He just wants something to happen on merit, but that's already happening. It's not like there is something at stake with regards to merit over here. We already have that in place. And then with regards to, of course, calls such as the extension in the past that was made, or even previously where the PTI chairman has been saying that till the elections at least there should be another extension. But when we take a look at all of this, it seems that there is, of course, a very genuine personal interest with regards to this appointment, and that, of course, goes in contradiction with what he's saying for the incumbent government and the PTM as well. So when we take a look at all of this, is this something that perhaps you think is not very clear to the people who are following him, or to the people who are listening to him, or the actions of the past are not reflective in terms of the opinion or the popularity that Peter enjoys? And if not, then how can we even begin to separate and the controversies that are in line with the political fabric, because nobody seems to notice or care that this actually exists?
Sana, very good question. And first of all, obviously, the politics of, the aggressive politics we have been seeing of PTI since last 6-7 months, of course, this is a continuity to it. And if we talk about the narratives, obviously, we know in his speeches he has been constantly mentioning X, Y, and Z. And obviously, he's been mentioning the the army leadership as well.
Not Z.
And, sorry?
Not Z. X and Y, not Z.
Yeah. And what happened was that obviously his narrative and his party's narrative, it has been constantly showing that, they have been promoting it within the people so that people can get some kind of idea why the other parties wanted power and why other parties wanted to be in a seat that can affect the choosing of the next chief. Here I want to mention that not this party, all of the political parties, I would agree with Farooq when he says that somehow it is highly unfortunate, but our political fabric, it is of that nature. Whenever it is in power, of course, it wants to have their own say in it, and once they are not in power, of course they keep on disturbing and they keep on highlighting that there is too much going on from that side, from the institution side, from the establishment side, which is not the case. Again and again, military leadership, especially we remember DGISPR's statement in which he categorically said that army has no role to play when it comes to politics, number one. And number two, very recently, Chief of the Army Staff highlighted once again in which he said that we are not playing any role, and of course, army would not be playing any role in the political fabric of Pakistan. Here I want to mention, I wonder why the political parties keep on talking about this, that they want to have their own say in it. To me, all of the corps commanders and all of the officers who are waiting in line, they are capable enough to lead the army.
PTI also agrees with you, but so we don't understand where the problem is actually.
I tell you, what it is, not only this government, during the previous government as well, we know that army leadership constantly got politicized, and we need to understand one thing, that since almost 20 years, all of the leadership which we are having right now, they are the ones who have fought against terrorism. They have been constantly, actively fighting against the terrorism, and we are talking about the officers in line who can tomorrow become Chief of the Army Staff or Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff. They are the very officers who have buried their own course mates with their own hands. We need to acknowledge this fact as well, that they are equally capable of leading the army, because they have gone through a process, they have gone through a process to be able to become the Chief of the Army Staff, number one. And number two, they have suffered, there are the way they have fought against terrorism, it is remarkable. But right at the end, what are they getting? When they are in a position to obviously lead the army, they are just being politicized, and it is highly unfortunate. And I think all of the political parties, they need to acknowledge it, including PTI, rather than saying this, that there should be a consensus from all of the parties. Why not go for the top two people? Just go for them.
And the thing is that there needs to be consensus with regards to the way we're looking at the armed institution in itself, and that should go without saying, especially in terms of the sacrifices that you're mentioning, Faisal. Of course, there have been many There's still a lot that is going on at the moment, and unfortunately, sacrifice is a word that is being used way too generously these days. But let me go back to Nayab, and when we take a look at this particular narrative or this particular controversial situation at the moment, Faisal, my earlier question was to you also in terms of understanding the fact that when we want to move ahead and want to separate the two and really make sure that this distinction is clear and apparent and vibrant in the society, then Nayab, it seems that at the end of the day, this is something that the population or the people or the followers of the political parties do not seem to be thinking at the moment. Unfortunately, even within this year, we have seen trends on Twitter that have been unprecedented, that we haven't seen in the past, are just examples of the way that perhaps the entire sanctity of these institutions has been damaged, and not just at home, also internationally as well. And it is because of these political involvements. So when we actually come to the separation, there is of course the reiteration or statements coming in from the army's leadership. But at the end of the day, is that even having an impact? Are we able to create the ripples that are needed? Are we able to make the difference in the way that these institutions and their involvement or not in the political arena is being looked at by the people? Because they seem to still see the things the way that the PTI chairman is showing them.
No, absolutely. That's a fantastic question. I think it goes back to something that the foreign minister recently spoke about, which is that democracy is something that is fragile. So for me, when you say, we have to educate people about the constitutional process as to how the army chief is appointed, or that we need not, or we want to be more informed about the role, the constitutional role that several institutions play, it goes back to the tumultuous and unstable history of democracy in our country. And that is very closely linked to the lack of civic education that we have in Pakistan. And this is something that I feel that we really, really need to stress upon. If we want our democratic institutions to flourish, and if we don't want, people like Imran Khan who are highly undemocratic in the core of their politics, in the core of their being, to disrupt this system or to make institutions controversial, we have to work towards cementing democracy at an educational level as well. And for that, I think we need to start talking about these very important constitutional processes, the roles of different institutions. We need to introduce this in schools. We need to talk about this more in the public domain, because if these foundations are made stronger, that is only how we won't be able to have people misleading, even popular leaders misguiding people, telling them lies, politicizing institutions needlessly. So I think that for me, the most important thing over here is that we need to focus on civic education. Had the people of Pakistan been taught about these processes, had we been taught about how important it is, to keep institutions independent and to strengthen our democratic fabric, we wouldn't have had anybody standing up in jalsas and talking about, blatantly unconstitutional things. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we also need to understand that we live in a post truth world. And it is very, very easy to misguide people, to spread misinformation, to spread ill-informed facts. And that is where, and I think that the world in general, not just Pakistan, but the world in general is still dealing with the post-truth world. This is still something very new, where anyone can go and say anything, and our fact-checking is process is still very slow. It catches up. So for someone like Mr. Imran Khan, who is a very, very conventional populist leader who has mastered the art of narratives and propaganda and the usage of information technology, it is quite unfortunate how he has used that to negatively impact society, to polarize society, to politicize institutions, to make them controversial. So I think we also need to talk about how the flow of information in the post-truth world, what role we can all play. And there are huge roles that fact checking institutions play, that regulatory authorities are going to play when we will come to terms with this idea of the post-truth world. So I think both of these things make it very easy for people like Imran Khan to misguide and mislead people about, something as, like somebody mentioned, something as, black and white as the appointment of the army chief, which is mentioned very clearly in the constitution. It should not
Right.
be this controversial.
Right, absolutely, and I understand that. But Farooq, when we take a look at what has been going on with regards to the kind of information, language, or narrative that the people are hearing coming in from the political leadership, coming in from the media sources as well, is important, because I want to understand the way that that's impacting or perhaps can be used to have a counter perspective as well. There is one, of course, the kind of language, the kind of statements, the kind of rhetoric that is being used within political rallies and jalsas. It seems perhaps that a lot of these boundaries have been blurred in terms of what can be said and what cannot be said, and what is being taken as a political language or a political rhetoric that is something that is used in rallies, and then there's something which forms contempt of court, or which forms something which is inappropriate. So where have we even drawn that distinction, and do we have any consequence if that line is crossed? And secondly, when it comes to the media, are we even playing the role of being able to educate the masses in terms of what is going on? Does everybody know what the Constitution says about the Army's appointment to begin with? And is there still a focus on being able to spread that sort of democratic values within the country? Because it seems whatever we see on media as well is perhaps a very sensationalized version of what the political leadership themselves are saying. Is that so?
Right. If I'm correct in deducing, there are two parts of your question. One
Yes.
about freedom or extent of speech, and the second one is, of course, what media is doing in educating people.
Yes.
Look, regarding media, especially educating about Constitution, if you by us you mean you and I, the people who actually participate in the debate, this program, I think we are doing, God's work, and we keep on doing whatever we can to explain these matters to the people, right? And everybody who's listening. But when it comes to your 50 channels that are private channels, I'm afraid no. The answer is no. There's this. Very popular saying, "Har shaakh pe ullu baitha hai, jame gulista kya hoga?" That an owl is sitting on every branch. What will become of this garden, right? That is the state of affairs in media. You explain to others what you yourself know. My concern is, with the exception, very few exceptions, which are really laudable exceptions, most of the anchors and the people who are dealing in media don't know anything about the Constitution, and they don't know a Constitution per se, so they cannot explain anything. Regarding freedom of speech, let me be very clear. You said earlier that regarding Twitter, that these trends are unprecedented, that were against, honorable soldiers and all. I will, in order to answer that, I will say that is because trends and Twitter itself is unprecedented in Pakistan history. 20 years ago, there was no Twitter, there was no Facebook, there was no YouTube trends. So these things are new. I honestly don't think that any trend or any video or any talking point can actually malign army. My concern is about doing or acting on those impulses. When Imran Khan Sahab says that he is going to actually march on Islamabad and then lay the siege until he gets what he wants, the biggest concern is that his fight with powers that we started when there was the issue of appointment of DGISI, right? And we all know that he seems to have his favorites, and to actually get them into power. And I'm not talking about, don't take this comment as a disqualifier for anybody, but his worldview is that if he doesn't get his way, he will fight this system and he will paralyze it. That kind of an attitude is frightening because it can have a very long-lasting impact. Let me spell it out for you. Pakistan Army is a disciplined force. When I say giving tree, I don't exaggerate. I have not been a traditional, fan, so to speak, of any force. I was very critical of Army's role in politics during General Musharraf's time. But then, during war and terror, earlier Faisal was saying that, there's officers who have actually murdered their own course mates. I'm not a soldier, but I have murdered my friends who donned uniform and who sacrificed for this nation with my own hands. So I know what this pain is. I know how much sacrifice there is, and I can tell you, Sana, honestly, the worst thing that you can do is demoralize our really valiant soldiers, right?
Absolutely.
And because so far, since inception of this country, this force has been held together because of discipline and dedication to the cause, a national cause. My concern is when you try to polarize it, when you try to, play one official against another, we have seen the worst examples as well. When the central order collapses, then many journals become warlords. You don't want to go there. You don't want to create that kind of environment. That's why I say trust the merit system, trust the system itself. Earlier Faisal was saying that all are very capable. I am not qualified to pass judgment on qualification of anybody, but I tell you one thing, I'm a good student of history and politics and systems. I can tell you that the merit system in Army absolutely works. So trust that system and don't try to politicize it. If you do, in the short run you might get what you want, but in the longer run you are spelling doom for the country. And which doom? The doom will start with you because you are the person who started it all.
Right, and Faisal, I know you're eager to add something, but let me just thank our guest, Ms. Nayab Jan, for joining us. Unfortunately, we're short of time, so we're going to be quickly moving on to the next segment after your comments. So thank you, Nayab, for being a part of the show and sharing us your views. Yes, Faisal.
Yeah, earlier Nayab said something about obviously the bitter realities of our, politics. Of course, she highlighted that this institution, the Chief of the Army Staff, always promotions, they always had an impact on politics. She rightly pointed out, but I just want to mention that of course all of them Chief of the Army Staffs, they were handpicked by the previous political parties, and that's why I would agree whoever says that there should be a consensus. But when I say consensus, then the consensus should be amongst the political parties that they will never ever politicize the.
That's a good point. Let me.
They will never
Faisal,
ever
sorry to cut
politicize the
you, but
institutions.
let us take it to the next level. Let us take it to the next level, because the idea came from the president of Pakistan that the opposition should be consulted. Then the president's office also has another power to hold a referendum. Let us have a referendum on who should be an army chief, right? If you want consensus, then let's go for that.
No, I'm saying that there should be consensus.
It is a discipline matter. No. It is a discipline matter.
Never be politicized.
It is a merit system matter. Don't actually introduce the political nuances into the discussion. I think that at this moment there is a merit list. There is a procedure laid out in the law.
Follow the merit list.
Let us follow that. And I don't want any kind of consultation or any other political input.
I think Varun, you both are on the same page now. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding. Faisal is saying that he's absolutely in agreement with you, and I don't think that he has any other opinion ever on any other matter as well.
I just twisted the statement.
Right. So we're going to be moving on to the next segment with regards to female education and what has been going on in Afghanistan, the way that the Taliban have unfortunately not fulfilled their commitments, and one of the most important ones was with regards to access to female education. And for unfortunately, beyond the sixth grade, this is not something that has been seen since the past year, more than that now. But Farooq, when we take a look at the consequence that we now see in terms of increasing sanctions from the US on the Taliban regime, I want to understand whether that is helping or not, because at the end of the day, we see that there is a lot of stuff that is going on within Afghanistan with regards to the economic and humanitarian crisis, and then of course the potential threat of terrorist activities, actual suicide bombings and other incidents of terrorism happening within Afghanistan, and then the way the Taliban regime is trying to handle the entire country. There is, of course, a lot of issues with regards to what the people are having to deal with as a result of that. And we can put the blame, of course, wherever we would like. But when we talk about the consequence, are the US sanctions or US steps as a consequence of the fact that the Taliban are not fulfilling their commitments actually helping towards fulfillment of those commitments?
Whoa, this is a tough one. I tell you why. One principle that we have to actually look at is that so far our experience of history tells us that sanctions never work. Had sanctions worked, North Korea would have given up its nuclear bomb. Had sanctions worked, Iran would have never been suspected for any kind of nuclear ambition. Had sanctions worked, the Ukrainian war would have been over a long time ago. Sanctions don't work, and it is, an exasperated attempt to channel your frustration into something tangible, right? That said, I tell you that I'm father of two girls. I'm talking to a girl, and at this moment, the entire country, at least fathers like me, are celebrating that one angel is back in the country, that is Malala Yousafzai, after a long time. I tell you that I think that girls' education per se, and especially girls' education, is sine qua non. It is compulsory, it is a must. I think that Afghan Taliban are actually not actually bringing this kind of sanctions on themselves, but they are poor, broken people who have been destroyed, ravaged by warfare for past 40 years, and the fact that at this moment they have taken out one very crucial part of the educational system for girls. I mean, they can go to primary schools, they can go to universities, but you have taken away the secondary school chunk from schools. That means you have blown a crucial piece of the bridge itself. So nobody
Absolutely.
in the future can proceed to the universities or careers. I think that is highly deplorable. I've been saying that for quite some time, and I think that sanctions or no sanctions, they should at least have mercy on their own daughters and let them go to school. School in Kabul, in Afghanistan, not in Islamabad or elsewhere. Let them send their daughters to the schools in their own country, because if they don't, I tell you, karma finds a way to come back and punish you.
Yeah,
Absolutely, and this is of course going to impact Afghanistan in the future. And Faisal, you can add very quickly to this as well, but let me also ask you, because among the plethora of excuses that have been given with regards to this ban, there is also the fact that it is perhaps a cultural issue, it is perhaps an issue that the tribal elders or the people in general are not willing to send their daughters to school. And then there's of course a lot of statements coming in denying this fact. Which one is the truth?
Of course, the second statement is, it's all about the culture. Of course, if we talk about Islam never disallows female education and all of these things related to it. There are rights for the females. I would fully agree with the maestro Farooq when he says that sanctions, obviously it would further deepen problems for people of Afghanistan. It would further take them to the Stone Age. Rather, we should have, I think the word we should be using, rather than using the sanctions, we should be using the positive engagement with Taliban regime out there. How can we can do it? Of course, if they could do it for the peace process, Afghan peace process, by including other Muslim countries. Why not for this? Why not you include Turkey? Why not you can include Malaysia? Why not you can include the Gulf countries? They can do it. They must do it. And I think
But
this.
how exactly is that going to help? I don't understand that. How is this going to actually contribute to this within Afghanistan?
Sana, if we talk about female rights to education, I don't think that the countries I'm talking about, if they sit with Taliban, they will be bringing the conclusions, they will be bringing the positive results. It's all about.
But Faisal, when have we had positive conclusions when somebody has sat down with the Taliban?
Well, Afghan peace process itself was successful, but of course there were demands
But it
from the
resulted in a
Taliban.
very haphazard evacuation of the US troops. It wasn't a success in that sense.
A success in a way that it actually gave them a roadmap. We can discuss whether they have achieved the roadmap or not, or whether they are working on it or not.
All
But
right.
still, we can
Faisal,
talk over it.
Unfortunately, we are really
Positive
short of time,
engagement.
but I'm sure we had a lot to say to you, and I'm sure
I-
Farooq does too. So
I have
very,
to
very
slip
quickly,
in
Farooq,
one
I'll give
line,
you a chance
Sana.
to say something.
Sana, yeah. Only one thing. When you say that it is all cultural, that means that we are insulting Afghan culture, because no culture, no religion can allow deprivation of daughters' right to education. I think that it is,
Absolutely.
you cannot teach them. It is a crucial thing. They have to see it for what it is.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Farooq Madafi and Raja Faisal, for joining us. And hopefully, Faisal will have a chat more on this after the show and maybe sometime on air as well. That's all that we have from the debate. See you tomorrow.